Hello, everyone, and welcome to Stall 7, Ultiroad's AUDL podcast. I'm Alex Rubin alongside Bryan Jones. And Bryan, just got to start off by saying, welcome back. It's been a little bit. I'll apologize myself for some personal conflicts that prevented the podcast from happening over the past few months. We had an exciting second half of the AUDL season transpire. And just as importantly, I'll say, as all of that, I just want to give you a big congratulations with New York Pony winning WUCC in the middle there.
Thanks. Yeah, it was a really fun experience. I've been thinking about like now what the storyline is around, how much of history gets applied to choosing to defend in last year's nationals after we won. I haven't heard too much talk about it since then. It seems to have put the jokes to rest, but it was a really fun win. So a really fun experience to do it with those guys. Just incredibly special team. But yeah, like you, I was also incredibly busy with work. So even leading up to Worlds. So it's good to be back. Like this AUDL season has turned out in a lot of ways like we thought it would, and in some ways like we didn't think it would. Some surprise teams getting into the playoffs and some unexpected moments. But yeah, it's going to be a fun playoff.
I'm super excited for these playoffs. We'll get a chance to talk about them a little bit later. Charlie and Keith from the Deep Look Weekly Radio Show will be joining us. But first, let's talk about how we got here before we dive into the three playoff games. Our playoff picture is set. Regular season's over. We have division winners in New York, Chicago, Carolina, and Colorado. None of them are playing this weekend. Our second place finishers in each division. In the East, we have DC finishing with just losses to New York. We have Minnesota finishing with 2 losses to Chicago. And I think they lost to Madison also, right? I think that's right. We have Austin coming in second place in the South, beating out Atlanta there. That one's a spicy one. We'll have to make sure we talk about that. And Salt Lake coming out of the West. And our third playoff teams, Philadelphia, Indianapolis, and San Diego. The South not getting a third playoff team because there's only 5 teams in the whole division. Of those teams, I think the top 2, maybe not in the West, but the top 2 in each division seem pretty much in line with our preseason expectations. The third team is maybe a bit of a surprise, but just looking at those 11 teams as a whole, Bryan, what stands out to you the most?
Well, I think, the biggest surprise is Austin, right? Being in the playoffs over Atlanta. This Atlanta team, felt like it could be challenging Carolina down in the South, but that didn't happen. Austin, seized the moment and took advantage of it, and they have a great thing going on. I think they're one of the best storylines of the year.
Yeah, especially, they sort of had their breakout party that wasn't back in 2021 when they, came a few minutes from making the playoffs, and that last second lost to Dallas, or last week lost to Dallas. And I think not that we counted them out, we knew they'd be competitive with Atlanta, but I think we both expected Carolina and Atlanta to be significantly better than them. Austin, beat each of those teams this season. Good for them. We'll see if they're able to give Carolina a game on the road. They're playing next week, not this week, so we won't talk about that in this episode. But to me, I think the team that stands out the most is the Philadelphia Phoenix. They started the season 0-3. We were pretty hard on them, on this show.
I don't know about we. I was definitely hard on them. Were you? I was hard.
I feel like I felt pretty similarly. Maybe I didn't come off, quite as vocally about it. But I thought Boston and Montreal both really had the inside track, and both of them really faded down the stretch. So good for the Phoenix to take advantage. Can
you believe Montreal fading away they did? They started out the season red hot. They were like pretty much a few wins away from what looked like securing a playoff spot that early in the season. And in fact, to the point where I got chastised for saying they had a stranglehold on that third position. But it looked like they had kind of got all the tiebreakers they needed. And then Philadelphia won the revenge game, and that just changed the entire course of that division.
Yeah, I think Montreal also was impacted more than other teams with the World Games and WCC losing a healthy handful of their star players to those competitions, at least more so certainly than Philadelphia and Boston. But yeah, I feel like Montreal has to feel like it underperformed this season and probably, it could have been in this spot and it wasn't, and it's the Royals' fault more so than it is Philadelphia's from Montreal's perspective.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And the other interesting team here is Indianapolis, which maybe I was lower than I should have been on entering the season, but
I was trusting you on that. We talked about it early in the season about they lost that really close game to the Radicals, and I asked you, is this team capable of making the playoffs? And you were resounding no. So I think I got to apologize to San Diego, but you might have to apologize for Indianapolis to Indianapolis.
Yeah, that's fair. Good for the Alley Cats for beating Madison in Bree Stevens, and as much as the focus should be on Indy here for actually making the playoffs and getting it to continue their season, the Radicals haven't made the playoffs since 2018. Are they they were one of the biggest dynasties in the league? Going back to their inaugural year in 2013. Is it time to say the Radicals are kind of done?
I mean, they're definitely not the team they once were, and there's going to be an era change coming really soon, but those guys are scrappy. Madison is the capital city ultimate. I don't think they're done. They'll be competing for a playoff spot again, and they'll find a way to claw back in. It's too good of a coaching staff, too good of a culture to just go by the wayside.
Yeah, no, I think that's what they definitely have a really positive, not just a team culture, but really a community culture. I think all the young kids, all the 12, 13-year-olds going to their games back in the early seasons are now actually becoming players on the team. I think more so than other teams that haven't built quite the connection with their community yet. The Radicals might start to see that investment pay off. Yeah, I could definitely see them bouncing back from that for sure. You alluded to it earlier. Let's get into this, Brian. I'm gonna go back to our preseason picks here, and just gotta point out that we had DC and New York respectively coming out of the East, and New York looking pretty solid there for you. I hope DC steps up for me. We each have Carolina. You actually wrote Raleigh, but it's Carolina. We have you picked Chicago. I picked Minnesota. That'll be a good one if Minnesota is able to beat Indy this weekend. And you had Portland coming into this championship weekend.
I think it was Portland over Colorado, by the way.
It's just written down as Portland, so we can't.
We're gonna have to go back
to go listen to it. Yep,
Portland over Colorado. So I will have to take the L on Portland without a doubt. But Colorado's looking pretty good for a second team. So we'll see.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I also actually had Colorado as my second team and had San Diego as the first team, which is not looking as strong of a pick in retrospect. But at least neither of them went 2-10.
It was a good 2, though. It was a really good 2.
It was.
You got to admit,
it was a really good 2. And honestly, one of those 10 was that double overtime loss to Colorado was a really exciting game too. Back, I think it was like week 3, week 4, something like that.
Yeah. Well, it's just if I could play a tune right now, and I'm trying to channel my inner Tad Whistle of just a salute to Portland's season. The first few weeks you looked really good. I thought for sure you were going to be in the playoff race. I talked about your volatility, that I thought you had the most talent and the capability to overcome things. And, I would say that you were a disappointment, but I know that you're all disappointed with me. So that it's okay.
Now, there's one more team that I want to talk about before we get into these playoff games. That's the Atlanta Hustle, missing out on the playoffs after coming. Honestly, they should have been at championship weekend last year. They, blowing a lead to New York and losing on the last second buzzer beater. We talk about what do you think went wrong for the Hustle this season?
Roster composition. They just can't get. I mean, they don't really practice in the same way that other teams do, and they take a lot of out of towners to try to compete with talent. And they have not figured out how to put it all together. It's always been a team that has enough talent to win any game they play in. Defensively, you see a lot of good things, but they don't play a great offensive game. And they had the chance to take a win away from Carolina late in the season. They couldn't pull it out because of end zone opportunities where they could not punch the disc in when it mattered most. And for them moving forward, that's like the hardest thing is recruiting of talent, super important, but a cohesive team is a really fun and rewarding experience. And you kind of contrast two teams, right? Atlanta with this big ceiling they come with the talent they have, in Indianapolis with looks like a low ceiling, they lose their best player, but yet they play as a team and have a great culture that carries them to the playoffs. So you're looking at two sides of different.
I just want to point out that Atlanta did actually beat Indianapolis a few weeks ago.
Right, but that's what I'm saying is Atlanta is the more talented team. And they can go and win those games, but they drop games they shouldn't. Right? Indianapolis is winning games that they should and being consistent. And it's just two different flavors. Indianapolis is in the playoffs because they have 3 playoff spots for sure. Atlanta would be in there with 3 without a doubt. But I'm just contrasting the style in which the team is constructed. Is that Indianapolis finds a way to play together, and they may not have the ceiling that Atlanta does, but Atlanta has a lot of variance.
Got it. So I actually feel the same way you do about Indy, about Austin, and that, they really came together, built this strong team culture, kind of grew from the ground up. Yeah, they recruited some talent. Getting Kyle Henke back is a nice perk, compared to last season. But they did exactly what they were supposed to do. They, won their home games. They had a really tough schedule. They had to go to Chicago and Madison. And, no one else in their division did that. So good for Austin, really, in my mind, for coming out of this in one of the top 2 spots and for getting the wins they needed to in order to do that.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, we are going to take a quick break here to welcome in Charlie and Keith from Deep Look. And once they're on, we'll discuss the 3 playoff games we have this weekend. Philly at DC, Indianapolis at Minnesota, San Diego at Salt Lake. 3 out of those 6 teams won't be playing again next weekend. So it'll be really exciting. Stick around, more to come from us. All right, everyone, welcome back to Stall 7. Bryan and I are joined by Charlie and Keith from the Deep Look podcast. Do you call it a podcast, or it's a radio show, I think, right?
It's a weekly radio show.
There we go.
Don't you dare call it a podcast.
We're here to talk about the playoff games this weekend. Let's start over on the East Coast. My new hometown, Philadelphia, will be playing in DC. And this will be an interesting one. The 2 teams played each other back-to-back weeks in early July, and they were both 1-point games that went in favor of the Breeze. What do you all think is going to happen this time?
Well, first of all, thanks for having us on. It's nice to come to somebody else's podcast and not have to set up the whole show and be the host. So appreciate you having us here. I will just quickly say I'm excited for this game. I am a little skeptical that it's going to be what we saw during the regular season. I think the Breeze are going to get their stuff together and close out a more comfortable win at home. They have a great home field advantage. Big crowds come out to DC, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of people out for this playoff game. And, the big question's been about their defense. Can their D-line actually start to get the job done? I think it still remains to be seen, but I like their chances of getting a more comfortable win in this game than we saw them. Basically, they should have lost to Philly at least one of those games, and Philly found a way to lose. But my instinct is that DC is going to show us that they're ready for the playoffs, and they're starting to get ready for New York.
It's really interesting. Last year, DC, when you contrast the 2 seasons, we were, as a media kind of crew, we were talking about how good they looked, and I think they had a game where they blew out Boston 32-18 or something like that, where their D-line punched in every single turnover, and they had this great regular season, and they were the number 1 seed in the East, I think, heading into the playoffs, and then they lose one to Raleigh, and this season has been so much different, where it's just been 2 losses to New York, where the games got kind of close at times, but not really. It was a definitive win by New York, and then the last part of the regular season, they had those 2 games against Philly. I watched them versus Boston, where they played kind of I would almost call it sleepwalking through the game. And I've never seen a DC team look like this before, where it's just like you said it, Charlie, like their defense hasn't been up to where we kind of our expectations are. Their offense has been fine, but they haven't totally figured it out as a team. And on the one hand, you could be worried about that. You could be saying these results don't really match the expectations. But on the other hand, I also share that same skepticism. Like this DC team has one mission this season. It is beat New York. Everything else is just like get to the playoffs, stay healthy, figure it out, move forward. And I think you've got to be liking their chances coming into this. And it's going to be kind of stunning if they put in the same type of repeat effort that we saw in the regular season.
And I'll just jump in before somebody else has anything to say. I still think back to week 1 when they played New York at DC, and it was an extremely high-level game for that point in the season. Both offenses looked amazing, and New York ultimately pulled away, but I think New York has shown that they're kind of in a tier of their own this year. Yes, it's true that DC didn't really play great defense in that game either, but the rest of these games, they already went through the whole regular season. We're gonna be the number 1 seed. Whoa, like all the things last year. And what came of it? An incredibly disappointing first round loss. I think this is typical of teams that have gotten good and know that they're better than most of the teams that they're going to play. They don't necessarily bring it week in and week out during the regular season. You see it in the NBA. You see it towards the ends of NFL seasons on a regular basis. I think that we're going to see DC ready to play in these playoffs. So I'll pass the torch here.
I don't get, other than just blind faith, why you have that sense of this DC team over an entire season. Now, it is a little weird because basically the only game that they probably really got off for was New York, and it was a million years ago. I mean, it might as well have been in 2012 or something. It took forever. Yeah, they had the one, I guess, the week 7 game where they didn't look very good against New York, even though they covered the spread. They lost by 4, and it didn't. To me, it never felt that competitive, I guess, in the second half anyway. Looking specifically at this matchup, right? They win against Philly by 1 twice in one pretty miraculous instance. Philly, one of those times with Jordan Ryan, who might be their most important player. I don't know how exactly you want to weigh Jordan Ryan, but I think he's definitely valuable. And one time with Jordan Ryan there. So I don't know, man. I have trouble really separating these teams. I definitely have a lot of trouble believing there's just some switch that DC is going to flip without any evidence that they have been dialed in that manner at all from the entire year. You sleepwalk through the season when you're the big dog because you've earned it, right? When you're New York, you could walk through the season, but you would expect to see them get up for their big games. And I don't know that we necessarily ever saw that from them. So I would be concerned about a team that we haven't seen turn it on suddenly doing so at just the right time.
I mean, I think it depends on if they think this is a big game or not. Right? They have the 2 wins in their back pocket against Philadelphia. As much as you want to say, they were a little closer than you might have expected, but they did get the wins. And it's a question.
I mean, they maybe should have lost the first
100%. But I'm saying
yes.
100%. But it's their mindset of like, is this it's a team we've beat already twice? Like, we got this, don't worry about it. Or is it like, this is a playoffs, flip the switch now kind of mode? And I think that's up to the coaches, the leadership on the team to really be able to turn that on. I trust the DC will do it. And I trust that they're using this as preparation for the New York games, like Bryan alluded to earlier. And I'm curious, honestly, if Philadelphia is going to bring that same intensity. I mean, they have to feel like there's a chip on their shoulder. They have to feel like they deserved an earlier win, and this is their chance to prove it. And I'm not sure if Philadelphia has that next level to reach to or not. And I think we all can agree that DC does.
And we saw it in terms of, there was an article recently talking about kind of the high variance that Philadelphia plays with. And I think they lead the league in hucks. And you have James Pollard, who is a big time scorer, but also a big time thrower. And it feels like Philadelphia could win this game if they could find a way to turn it into a huck fest where they come down with a lot. Because, I think Keith, you hit on with Jordan Ryan. I think he is their most important player. He has the ability to hit hucks from all kinds of places on the field. He's this big reset target that can get open and people are comfortable throwing to on an AUDL field. And with Mott around and Alex Thorne, like this Philadelphia team is good. They're not bad. They're not. This is not, after seeing them kind of rise up through the season. Like even their other losses to other teams and early on, they kind of like were snake bit a little bit in going 0-3 at the start of the season. It's still hard to figure out a way where they come away with this. Like, do we see a possibility where this DC team just lays an egg and like can't stop this Philly offense? Like this Philly offense is better. It's not been perfect. They're going to make some big plays, but it feels like with an experienced coaching staff and an experienced team, they're going to know how to stop those big plays and make Philly grind it out the entire time.
I think it's also a question of if either team can punch in breaks. I think we're looking at two teams with really high level offenses. And I feel like I was pulling up earlier today the stats from just the two games that played against each other. And I think we're like combined less than 20% on break conversion percentage. I think whichever team is better at punching, I mean, that's how Ultimate works, is usually more breaks will win you a game. AUDL is a little bit different with the end of quarters and whatnot. But I think if one team's defense is performing significantly better than the others, that'll be the real difference here.
Yeah, the Breeze break percentage is 28.5%, Phoenix 23%. I think that's enough of a difference to actually matter. You look at the top defenses in the league, Wind Chill coming in at 37.5%, the Empire 37%. So I mean, we know the Breeze are just an average defensive team. The Phoenix are a little bit worse than average. And I mean, to Bryan's question, I mean, I definitely think it's possible that DC just no-shows. I mean, they've had whole games where their defense doesn't really do much. Like, where has AJ Merriman been this year, like, compared to what we saw last season? I'm not really sure, to be honest, why the defense feels like it's taken a huge step back from a year ago. Because similar personnel, explosive playmakers, Luke Rafis, great defender, Jasper Tom, incredible handler defender. I don't quite get what's going on, but they just haven't been able to score with the same kind of effectiveness on the D-line. Alexandre Fall, like, I don't know, they have like great pieces. I'm curious, they're adding Del Rico Johnson back this week. I'm curious, like, is Del Rico ready to go out and play elite defense right now? Or has he like not been playing quite enough at a high level? David Cranston's like their most sort of statistically strong D-line player, and it's easy to imagine him like marshaling the offense for them. At the end of the day, I just think like the talent gap is enough to make me feel confident in the Breeze, but they could lose. I mean, I think that they've showed us this season that they could lose this game.
Well, we are also focused on the Breeze, and to me, it's less about can the Breeze beat Philly, and it's can Philly beat the Breeze? Because if there's one thing, I'm not going this whole conversation without talking about the one thing Philly does best, which is blow in incredibly close games somehow. Just time after, just finding new ways to lose. I mean, it is horrendous, and surely in the back of the guys' minds, I mean, I'm sure they would love to like walk away with one to close the year. But man, it is really hard for me to put my faith in this team to win in a clutch situation. I do think they are good enough, and DC's like style of play is going to make these games close. But I don't know that I can buy Philly winning in the end when it comes down to it. Like, they are a team that I think if they can get the deep game going, that's good for them. But DC statistically is one of the best deep defenses in the league. I mean, they don't give up a lot of hucks. They don't give up a lot of huck completions. So I don't know. I want to believe. I was a preseason believer in Philly, but I can only watch a team stumble under pressure so many times before I'm like, I can't buy in on this.
Greg Martin is an X factor. That's all I'm going to say. Greg Martin is an X factor. They could get him going. We've seen him do it against the best defenses.
I was going to say that James Pollard is the X factor to me. I mean, Daniel Cohen put out a good stat today that he was the only player in the AUDL with 75 plus scores and double-digit blocks. And I think this is me and Bryan have been talking about this with Philadelphia all season, that they don't really cross over players too much. We were talking about them, being able to generate breaks. If they come to terms with the fact that this could be their last game and they're willing to play their stars a little bit more than they normally might, I feel like we could be in for a big James Pollard game both ways, and that might be the difference too.
The reason I wouldn't call him the X factor is because I just think he's straight up their best player.
Yeah, I agree.
So
with
like, I think he's really important. I mean, he's going to have to play well. But
you think James Pollard is better than Jordan Ryan? You'd rather have James Pollard on the field than Jordan Ryan?
I think Jordan Ryan, to me, Jordan Ryan's the X factor, but James Pollard is like, he's the rock. Like, you know, you're going to get from him.
And I think like statistically, the answer is yes. Like he's been better on a point by point basis than Ryan statistically. I think that his defensive ability is key for them, you know, after turnover. I just think, you know, to say he's the X factor, I mean, yes, he's going to have a great game. I just feel like he is the guy for them in a way that maybe Greg Martin is not. Like Greg Martin is a really useful role player. So anyway, I don't disagree that James Pollard is going to be important for them if they want to win this game.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to look at it from like the statistical point of view and then from like the coach's kind of like safety blanket point of view, because Pollard is a big playmaker, and he throws a lot of hucks and there's a lot of variance in that. And so there's the good James Pollard, there's the great James Pollard, and then there's the I wish you didn't throw that James Pollard. But he's had a breakout year, and he's been a great thrower for them, and they've needed it. And at the same time, Jordan Ryan just makes the offense feel sustainable to me. Like over and over again, that you could grind out possessions with this guy because of just how big bodied he is, how comfortable everybody else in Philly's gonna be like being able to throw resets. And if there's anything, you know, when you get into these playoff games, coaches are going to try to clamp down on the obvious playmakers. Like if DC plays the game they want to, it means Greg Martin's not scoring anything deep, and James Pollard is being forced to dump the disc over and over and over again. And if you get that type of situation, then Jordan Ryan becomes incredibly important for Philly's chances to just stay in the game. But I still like, I was kind of thinking about Keith's question, like kind of going back to DC. It's like, what evidence do we have for this DC team to all of a sudden just wake up? And you're right. There's kind of like a built on faith thing. And it's like, what's the argument for that? Which is that DC, like when's the last time DC lost to Philly? It's been a long time, right? This is the first time Philly's been in the playoffs since 2013. DC, those types of players, when they're just viewing the end of the season, like for them, their mark of success is, do they play a good game against New York? And do they win that game? So is there any worry that they're looking past Philly going into this game? I don't really think so. I think they're going to show up. Like this is an important game by virtue of it being an elimination. Doesn't matter who the opponent is. But yeah, if DC gets out to a slow start, it's going to be really concerning no matter what.
Well, I think I'm going to go ahead and make my pick. I'm taking DC and I'm taking them to cover, although I think the number is very tight. So I'm not betting on this game, but I'm going to take DC minus 2.5.
I'm going to take DC. Look, we got 2 1-point games. Phoenix we know what they're about. So why not have a 1 or 2 point game that DC wins in the final moments? That makes the most sense to me. So I'm going to take DC, but Philly to cover.
I think DC's going to cover barely, and they're going to win. But I think Philly's going to bring it within 1 with like 3 minutes to go and make it feel like a really close game after DC kind of leads the entire way of the game.
I think I'm with Keith here. Until the evidence points to the contrary, I'll have Philadelphia keeping it close and finding a way to lose it at the end. And I feel like it'll feel like Philadelphia loses it more than DC wins it too.
I kind of feel the same way. I think we're of the same mind on this, Alex.
Yeah, well, Philadelphia Phoenix, maybe, I guess it's too early to say this maybe, but look towards 2023 to be my new hometown team to root for.
You driving down to DC to watch a game, Alex?
I'm actually not.
Train?
It's my sister's birthday and she lives in Boston, so I'm going to go up there and see her for the first time in a few months.
That's a much better choice.
Now that you're in Philly, can you get Tyler DiGirolamo to actually come to a game? Like his name's on the roster like every year. Never appears.
I'll do what I can. Yeah.
Now there's an X factor.
Yeah.
Let's move over to the Central Division. We have the Indianapolis Alley Cats as 4-point underdogs to the Minnesota Wind Chill. Minnesota came into the season as, I think in my mind, really the divisional favorites with some of their pickups, and with the Chicago Union losing a few pieces. They actually lose both of their home games to Chicago to drop down to this 2-3 play-in game. Indy, meanwhile, recent championship weekend experience, you could say, 2019, and bolstered a little bit by playing half their games indoors, but they edge out the Madison Radicals, who haven't made the playoffs since 2018. Keep that in mind, to make that third playoff spot. So to me, the real question is this game even going to be close? I think when last time the two teams played in Minnesota, Minnesota won by like 15 points or something like that.
I like Indianapolis. I do. Like at the start of the season, we were pretty low on them. They had lost that game to the Madison, and they had now gone through the regular season, and they play really well as a team. And it's fun having Keegan North go back there and get the performances they've gotten from the rest of the players. You get to hear about, Cameron Brock still up there and like leading the league in goals. It's pretty incredible that it's still happening. But I think that's where that stops. Is I like the team, I like the way they play together, but Minnesota is just supremely talented. And considering Minnesota's had them right in the corner, or right where they want them, it's hard to see this going a different way.
Yeah, I think it's hard to see it. You're right. Like I do think that Indy's done a fantastic job playing up, playing with a perhaps less talented, less experienced group. It was really easy to write them off at the beginning of the year when, suddenly they lost some of their top players to injury. They lose Travis Carpenter, but they also lose Trey Dines, who's like one of their 7 best guys. So it was easy to start to think this team wouldn't compete, and they had guys who stepped up. Lucas Konieris, Jeremy Koish, just kind of like digging guys out and making the most of the team that they had. And I keep hearing on Swing Pass about this insanely efficient D-line offense. If you're gonna have a strength, why not there? But you just feel like they're so outgunned, having to travel. And they're missing a couple of players that I think are pretty valuable in Brett Matsuka and Nick Hutton, excuse me. They are missing Nick Phillips, but they pretty much missed him all season. Couple absences for Minnesota, but I just feel like they're in a much better place to absorb them. I like the toughness from Indy. I don't think they're going to go down without a fight. I don't think we're going to get another 15-point blowout, but it's just hard to see them being able to overcome Minnesota. Although, I felt the same way about Minnesota playing Madison, and look how that worked out. So, and Indy playing Madison. So,
the Central's been just a weird division overall. Like week to week, you get some very unusual results. The problem I have with Indy is that away from home, they're just not very good. I mean, like, look at their results away from home. Okay, they got the win against Madison, so you got to give them credit for that. It's basically what got them in the playoffs. But besides that, they lose by 8 to Chicago. They get their doors blown off by Minnesota. They only beat Detroit by 4. They only beat Indy by 4, or Pittsburgh by 4. Like, this is a team that's built, like, we want to talk about their D-line efficiency. Well, their D-line efficiency is high because they play in an indoor stadium half their games. And so, of course, when the D-line gets the ball, they can score with efficiency. When they go on the road, they don't even put up points. They have to play a road game. I have no confidence in this team, especially going up against arguably the league's best defense. I think this game's not going to be all that close. And I understand why the line is steamed down. It's game opened at Minnesota -5.5. It's been bet down to Minnesota -4. But if I'm betting on this game, I'm coming back in on Minnesota at this point because I just really don't think Indy has the horses.
Yeah, I'm with Charlie here, but I feel like Minnesota -4 is the pick. But I feel like I don't need to rag on Indy too much. I feel like it's because Minnesota's really good. And what stands out to me most is that their best players are incredibly versatile. Right? You have Bevon and Abe Coffin, who can literally play any position and be capable. And, maybe not the best, right? You have, Andrew Roy is probably going to be more of your center handler than someone like Bevon. But you saw that ridiculous, through the double team flicky through for the buzzer beater last week that made Sports Center. You have a really capable team and a team where you can, change your game plan to match your opponent in a way that not every AUDL team has that luxury. And I feel like they've spent the season tinkering a little bit, moving some players around. And I feel like they can really use this Indy game almost like a warm up before they have the big test against Chicago next week.
It's not nothing that they're playing without Rocco Linehan. Like that's going to hurt them a little bit. And Indy's scrappy. Like if they can get a foothold early in the game, I mean, I think it's possible for them to keep it competitive. But, you know, it's hard to get the 15-point blowout in Minnesota out of your mind. And I think they'd really like to have Matt Zucca for this game.
Yeah,
me too. I mean, I think Keegan North could theoretically be the best player on the field in this game, and then the next 13 best players be on Minnesota.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like you're trying to imagine a scenario in which this happens, right? Like Minnesota hasn't kind of reached, I think, the peak of their potential yet, losing to Chicago. Right? We talked about at the beginning of the season, Alex and I, of like where this Minnesota team can go and like what is it like? How much does their talent matter and how good is this team on paper? And so you're trying to like figure out a scenario in which Indy like wins this game, which is like basically a Minnesota meltdown, right? Like that's what would be required at this point.
We've
Like,
seen it before.
and we have, yeah. So, but yeah, it's really one of those things where it's like Indianapolis is coming into this game. Their backs are against the wall. They're missing Matsuka. They have, they had Travis Carpenter go down at the beginning of the season. It's like, what is the mindset going into this? Like, they have nothing to lose. Like, from Indianapolis, like, this feels like you had an incredible season already. Like, you're playing with house money going into this game. With Minnesota, this is supposed to be your coronation year of winning the Central and going to championship weekend. This is supposed to be it. So the only angle I can find here is that like Indianapolis can play this game without a care in the world. Like their season has already been a success. And so does that give them like a little bit? Like I still don't think so. I think Minnesota probably leads this game by 4 or 5 going into the fourth, and Indianapolis kind of makes it close, brings it within 2, goes on a little bit of a run, and then Minnesota closes it out. I don't know if we're going to see total domination, but that would be a sign that Minnesota is ready to take the Central if we do see total domination.
Worth noting that I think Matsuka played like 5 games. They're far from. Well, I think he would be a big help. I don't think they are really conditioned to playing with him. They've been able to do a lot without him. But one of my big red flags, just in general for Ultimate, is you don't want your best results to be good losses. And aside from that Madison win, that's kind of how I feel about Indy. That unnerves me. They lose by 1 to Chicago, right? They play close with Atlanta. Those are what you're looking at as like their best results of the year, and yeah, that's a red flag. So, are folks ready to go to picks? Because I think we sound like we're all mostly in the same position. It's just a question of whether you think Indy can cover the 4-point spread or not.
The home way split makes me pick Minnesota -4.
For what it's worth, just pulled up the weather. It's supposed to be a solid mid-70s sunny 8-mile-an-hour wind. So I agree this won't be another 15-point blowout. Weather won't be a factor in Indy's typical indoor stadium. But I still think Minnesota covers the 4 points. I think the talent differential is just too high, and I think Minnesota is really gonna like sort of like we're talking about with DC, where we're kind of questioning whether they would turn it on for the playoffs. I think Minnesota is actually going to lock in and really use this to tune up before that Chicago game with the memories of last year still in their head.
Both of these teams are pretty middling against the spread. Minnesota is 6-4 for the weeks that we actually had spreads, and Indy was 6-5. So neither, Indy, I think, continued to overperform what people expect of them. So that part is a positive on their side. But yeah, I think you're going to see Indy play really tight for periods of this game and have a couple of lapses where Minnesota just kind of pushes them over. Maybe like 2 quarters or even just 1 quarter where Minnesota wins 8-3 or something like that, 7-2. That's the thing that makes a difference. So I am going to take Minnesota to cover, very uncomfortably doing so, but I feel comfortable with them taking the win.
I think it's so close on the cover. I mean, Minnesota's going to win this game. Like I can't imagine a scenario right now really that's plausible that Minnesota doesn't come away with a win. But that's a lot of points. And I think it's really close. But yeah, I'll take Minnesota to cover.
All right. There we have it. Let's move out west. This is probably to me the most interesting game of the weekend. Keep my West Coast biases aside. We got the San Diego Growlers traveling to face the Salt Lake Shred. Salt Lake is 2.5-point favorites at home. Salt Lake has 2 wins over San Diego already, including their first ever game. San Diego made championship weekend last year. It has a clear experience edge. And we could talk about this. I feel like Salt Lake has a bit of a talent edge there. So interesting battle there, yeah, between talent and experience, and Salt Lake with the home court advantage.
Well, I'll jump in here quick. This is a very interesting game. I think this is a chance to be the best game of the weekend. Obviously, Salt Lake's had the better season. Salt Lake kind of announcing themselves by kicking San Diego's butt. Was it week 1? I think it was week 1.
It was week 1. It was the opening night.
And here's the thing. Like, I think, 6 weeks ago, it felt like Salt Lake was like inevitable in some ways to get to the championship game and face Colorado, but I am not so sure now. I think we've seen San Diego start to figure it out a little bit. They have played much better lately. They're on a big win streak coming into the playoffs. And the last time we saw these teams play, San Diego was missing tons of its talent. I think Travis Dunn and Goose were not playing. I think that the Growlers' experience in the playoffs is going to matter a great deal in this game. And they're going to have been getting prepared for this matchup, a team that they have not yet beaten for a long time. And I think it's a coin flippy game to me. I think that, Salt Lake comes in as a 2.5-point favorite. They're playing at home, so I get that. But to me, this feels like easily the most likely underdog win of the weekend. I'm going to save my pick for the end, but I think San Diego's got a very good chance to win. Their offense is excellent, and they're going to be at full strength this weekend.
Yeah, I think you're right that this San Diego team is wise. They have a lot of experience. They have the capability to come with a game plan, I think, that can slow down Salt Lake. I think in the past, we've seen young teams come in and they're just like working harder than everybody else. They have kind of like lightning in a bottle sort of thing where they're able to go out and just make big plays. And that's what we saw from Salt Lake, where they were just running through teams at the beginning of the season, right? It was pretty darn incredible. But then everybody kind of catches up by the end of the season. Your stuff, doesn't smell as good as it used to. Everybody kind of catches on. And I don't, if Salt Lake had gone through and gotten like a major win in that like first Colorado game and really continued to be that dominant, I could see feeling differently that Salt Lake would run away with this thing. But I think San Diego's close, and I think this is going to be a close one. And I think you're right, Charlie. It's a coin flip.
That's about. I'm with y'all that it's a coin flip, and it's going to be a lot about which side of that coin you want to land on. I think it's a big deal that they're playing in Salt Lake. Maybe just attached to my priors on this, but prior to the season, I was thinking that Salt Lake's home field advantage could be considerable. And they took the 5-goal loss to Colorado at home, one of their 2 losses on the season. But otherwise, they've been pretty strong in Zion's Bank. So being able to go there, I think that as we saw, as Charlie and I just saw at some of the US Ultimate stuff, the base for Utah Ultimate is like really fired up, very prideful, and want to show everybody what their community can do. And this is a great representation of that. I'm sure that some of their sets have been scattered a little bit. Some of the shine has worn off, but there's no amount of tape that prepares you for the Jordan Kerr, Joe Merrill experience. There's no slowing that freight train down. I don't think it's really like taking advantage of the other pieces on the team.
Really, you think there's no amount of tape out there that's going to let them slow them down? You think that those 2 are just unstoppable?
Yes, they're going to eat. If you're not good enough to stop the 2 of them, they're going to eat. Like Jordan Merrill gets his game in and game out. I think really it's going to be about what can these defenses do. We know that Salt Lake has awesome high scoring offense. We know that the Growlers with a full lineup are going to be a well executing offense with a lot of experience. I think it's going to be how many turns can you generate and how efficient can you be with them. In one of these two matchups, the first of the two matchups, no, the second of the two matchups, Salt Lake able to get 25 break chances, San Diego able to get 20, but San Diego only scored 4 of them, and Salt Lake put in 10. In the other one, it was the percentages switched. The percentages held, but they just dropped lower. Salt Lake converted 23% of 26 break chances. San Diego converted 3 of 23 break chances. So both teams have been generally generous. It's just like, how can your D-line convert? And when we see the O-lines maybe step up a little bit, I don't know that we're ever going to see Salt Lake be a team that's like hyper efficient, but when we see the offensive step up a little bit and maybe there's a little fewer resources to dig upon when you're trying to score, who can punch in the couple of opportunities that they're going to get? Because that's going to be the difference, is really the D-lines to me.
I agree, Keith. And I think what stands out to me is exactly what you're saying with, who is going to stop Jordan Kerr, who's going to stop Joe Merrill. And I don't really think the Growlers have good matchups there. And I wonder if that means we'll see a little bit more junk, a little bit more zone. I know San Diego likes to do that, especially at the beginning of points before transitioning into a person set. But I think at the very least, the Salt Lake defenders are big enough and athletic enough to be able to play with Travis Dunn and Sean McDougal and Goose, who are, they'll all put up goals. They're all going to get stats. They're all really good players. But I really just don't trust this Growlers defense to be able to get the stops it needs, much less converting them against Salt Lake.
The Growlers defense has been bad this season. There's no way around that. But what I wish I could do, which I don't think I can yet do, is look at like specific games. Like, I want to look at how they've played in the last 6 games, because to me, we've seen a different San Diego team. And when they go in and they beat Colorado, like, to me, I stand up and I take notice of that, because like, Colorado just cruised through everybody else. But what happened in that game? The Growlers came in with a great game plan. They forced a lot of turnovers. They got 12 blocks or something. And they completely took Colorado out of their offensive rhythm. And that's why that game, to me, tells me that they're going to be able to do the same thing against Salt Lake. And so that's why I'm very interested in what San Diego is able to do. But statistically, you have to just recognize, like, their defense has not been good this year. I think it's still not going to be amazing. I think this game's going to be a shootout. But I think that we're going to see San Diego make the adjustments from the earlier matchups and turn this into a dogfight, like, down the stretch. Like, it's going to be close. It's going to be back and forth. Probably see a lot of second half holds. But I think you're going to have the teams very close, and it's probably going to hinge on 1 or 2 key turnovers late in the fourth quarter.
I think if this game's a shootout, it's in the grasp of Salt Lake to really take it away. Like, they have the athletic depth in this game. That's the game they want to play. If I'm San Diego going into this, right, you're walking into a young team stadium that's hosting a playoff game in their first season. It's going to be an incredibly emotional moment, meaning, like, everybody's going to be excited. If San Diego can slow this game down and not let that first punch come and knock them out, like, if they come out of the first quarter tied, that's a win. And that's going to kind of set the tone for the rest of the game. And if I'm them, I don't want this game going fast at all. I want Salt Lake to kind of, like, use their energy against themselves, have to really think, run through a lot of poachy stuff, run through a lot of zone, take their time, and have to be methodical about this and be patient and be determined. Because I can just imagine just this young team, like, chomping at the bit, trying to, like, just run through, get all these great layout Ds. So it's a question of, like, can San Diego just survive that first punch? And if they can, I think they have a great chance. But I don't think they want to play a shootout.
100%. I'm looking at the teams, the records for San Diego this year, and if their opponent has scored over 20 goals, then San Diego has lost. That's not a lot of results, but that's the pattern. San Diego pretty consistently can kind of get in that 21 to 23 range. Their opponent gets over 20, then San Diego doesn't win. So I'm with you. They need to slow the game down. A shootout is definitely Salt Lake style play. That to me that says that they're dictating the game and the pace of play. And I think San Diego needs to avoid that at all costs. If San Diego can make this 1917, something like that, like that's their zone. That's where they want to be.
I cannot imagine this game being 1917. And I don't necessarily disagree with what you all are saying, but I just neither defense is good enough to make this a 1917 game.
The only way it's a 1917 game if San Diego's zone is effective at slowing down the play. And,
sure, making grindy points.
Right. But I agree. I don't think that you're going to see a turnover fest where people aren't completing, especially if there's a lot of person defense out there. The pace of this game is probably going to trend higher than most other games with the offenses that are on the field.
I've gone first on picks both other times, so somebody else should go first.
I think that Salt Lake at the end of the day is probably going to have too much firepower. And unless San Diego can cross people over, I think that Salt Lake is going to have the energy in this game and is probably going to cover. So that's what I'm going to pick.
I think I agree that Salt Lake wins the game. I can see it being close, though. I might pick San Diego to cover, but Salt Lake to win.
I feel like I came into this conversation expecting to pick San Diego, to lean on the experience of a team that's been there before, that knows how to prepare for the postseason, that knows how to manage the regular season well, so that they're in the best position to play well in the postseason. I in my head, I was like, okay, I'm going to go into this picking San Diego, but thinking about can San Diego slow this game down, and not feeling confident that they can, it's like starting maybe I've kind of changed my tune to thinking that maybe Salt Lake is in the better position here. I can't see this game going under 44 or 45 very effectively as a total score. And to me, that just favors Salt Lake. Great home field advantage. They do have a good coaching staff, albeit less AUDL experienced. Yeah, I think I'm also going to take Salt Lake to win and San Diego to cover. My second middle of the podcast. Bad betting technique.
I'm definitely taking San Diego to cover. I think 2.5 is too many points for a team that's been the class of the division and has been playing really well the last few weeks. I will just tell you, I have some money on San Diego plus 220 because I think the number is too large. But I think if I'm really forced to pick which team is going to win, I still think I take Salt Lake. But it's super close to me. I feel like it really could go either way. And I don't know that I totally agree that a shootout is somehow terrible for San Diego. I think San Diego's happy to play in a game like that. I think they're happy to have their O-line go out there and just get hold after hold. We've seen them do that in the past. The thing that's held them back is that their O-line struggles against the best teams when they get to championship weekend, but not that they can't go out and just hold their way to a win in the West. So anyway, I think it's going to be very close. I guess I'm taking Salt Lake, but I think San Diego's got a 47% chance to win the game or something like that.
I'm of the same mind, which is obviously why I took San Diego to cover. And I'm with you on plus 220. Plus 220 implies that San Diego has a 31.25% chance of winning. And that just feels way off to me. Also, as I've kind of enumerated just on betting tips, if you are going to take San Diego to win, I think you should take the under as well. And you can't parlay them on DraftKings, but if you can get your friend to parlay them, or you want to just bet both sides of that, I would recommend that, because I do think that that's the most likely path for San Diego to win, is keeping the score lower.
All right. Well, that'll wrap us up for the games this weekend. Very excited to watch them. You can see them. I think the Philadelphia DC game is the Fox Sports 2 game of the week. The other two on AUDL.tv.
Wait, does that mean we're not going to get to watch it until like next week?
Oh,
Like, what is
no,
it?
it's live. It's live with me and Evan. So you'll get to hear my.
Oh, there we go.
Thank everything. Oh my gosh, I was going to be so mad if you're like, well, the AUDL is not going to tweet about it for 2 days. We all have to pretend it didn't happen. Awful.
Yeah, Charlie, Keith, before y'all head out, any last words, any last thoughts?
I've been waiting for the postseason to get here for like 6 weeks. Like the regular season has not had my attention because it just hasn't felt very important this year. And so I'm very excited to get into the playoffs and you know, cut away the chaff and like, let's look at the wheat.
My final thoughts is I just want to ask the hosts, can anybody besides New York win this? I need the real talk. Can anybody besides New York win this title?
You know my answer, right? Do I have to say it for you? No.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say like, yes, they could, but they're not going to. I just
New York's
think
too good this
New
year.
York's too good and too locked in. You know, look, every team can have an off game. You know, 2007 Patriots didn't win the Super Bowl. Anything's possible, but I think New York has it.
Yeah, sadly, I think that an off day for New York is like them beating most of these teams by 2 or something like that. You know, like I feel like off day for New York is beating DC by 2. Like that's, oh man, we didn't bring it today. They're just lapping the field. Like they might be like if they played the superpower Roughnecks, like I might favor New York to win that game. Like this might be the best team that we've ever seen.
Yeah, I think it would be close, but I think you'd have to give New York an edge. These are some of the best players there just playing their best game right now. And yeah, I think it's possible for Chicago, Minnesota, or I mean, any of the teams that are going to make championship weekend, assuming Colorado makes it, right, and Carolina does, that going into the fourth quarter, I would not be shocked to see a tie game. But the firepower and the depth just seems really hard to overcome. Like somebody would have to play, you know, Villanova versus Georgetown, old school, like shooting 60% from the field sort of game where you're just perfect on offense in order to upset this New York team. It would be a monumental upset.
Got some juicy looking potential matchups elsewhere in the bracket outside of the New York matchups though. I'm definitely looking forward to what the playoffs has to offer because I think there's a healthy amount of parity and the Central has just enough chaos to like plant the seeds of doubt in any of these teams. So I'm definitely looking forward to what the playoffs have to offer us.
And what I think is exciting is assuming that the favorites all win their divisions, we're going to get Carolina and New York as a semifinal. New York is a 1 seed, Carolina would be the 4 seed. So if everything goes to seed, we'll have a first-time finalist no matter what between Chicago and Colorado.
Or Minnesota.
Or Minnesota, yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
you were picking Minnesota earlier. Have you changed your mind?
Oh,
I was just saying if the seeds hold.
because they reseed at championship weekend, huh?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's awful. If you wanted to put money on Carolina at plus 330 or whatever they are on DraftKings, that's bad news, Bears.
Why has someone already done that in this call right now?
I don't know anybody who would do such a thing. Not without doing the research first.
All right. Well, that'll wrap up our playoff preview segment for this week. You can stick around. Bryan and I will be talking in our subscriber-only bonus segment about some surprising stats from the regular season. That'll do it for us this week. Thank you so much for listening. Charlie, Keith, thanks for joining. Make sure to hit us up on social media at Stall7 on Twitter. And that'll do it. You'll hear from us just about this time next week.